He trusts me. Don't take that away.
I am just trying to reach my son.
At a chilled city park, Maya, a calm neighbor with a teacher's patience, finds an 8-year-old boy trembling by the slide, clutching a tin robot called Bolt. A man in a navy suit and red tie sprints in, his blue eyes frantic. The boy hides behind Maya, silent. Tonight, a bravery map, a quiet corner, and one fragile word could heal a broken home. Will Maya lead them from panic to family? Wind rattled the swings, a thin whine across the city park. Maya paused by the path lights, hearing a sound softer than shoes on gravel. It was a child's sob, caught and starting again. She scanned the empty slide and the climbing dome. Near the sandbox, half in shadow, a small boy crouched with his back to the world, a tin robot clamped to his chest like armor. "Hey there," she said, voice low, palms open at her sides. "I'm going to sit over here, okay? Not too close." She knelt at a respectful distance, letting her knees find the cold ground. The boy trembled, unable to speak. The robot's paint was nicked, one eye dented. She saw letters scratched on its back, crooked lines that might have once read Bolt. His fingers dug into the metal as if it were the last warm thing left. "My name is Maya," she said. "I won't touch you. I'm going to breathe with you, in like a balloon filling. Out like a balloon floating away." She exaggerated one slow inhale, lifted her hands as if swelling a bright balloon. Then a soft, long exhale, her hands drifting skyward. He stared at her hands. His shoulders jerked. She repeated the breath again and again, matching his rhythm, letting silence do half the work. From her coat pocket she took a small hand warmer, cradling it in her palm like an ember. "This is for hands that got too cold. I can set it here," she said, placing it on the sand between them. "You can take it if you want." He didn't move. His lips were nearly blue. She tried once more. "I'll wait." The park quieted. Far off, a dog barked twice and faded. Maya counted a gentle beat in her head. She noticed his socks peeking from old sneakers, the frayed lace of one shoe gone entirely. She wanted to fix everything. She knew better than to rush. "Sometimes I talk to things when I can't talk to people," she said. She pointed to the tin robot. "Does yours have a name?" The boy's eyes flicked down to the robot, then back to her hands. A quake passed through him. He pressed his mouth shut so tight it quivered. With a tiny scrape, he nudged the robot forward in the sand. A whisper of metal on grit. "Bolt," she guessed softly. Tough name. Good for nights when the wind is loud. The wind answered, tugging at her scarf. She offered another breath. In like a balloon. Out slow. She let her cheeks puff just enough to make it a game. His chest hitched, then matched her. One breath, two, a little steadier. "I won't ask big questions," she said. "Only small ones. Do you want the warmer?" He reached a shivering hand, stopped short, then pushed the robot so its metal hip touched the packet. He waited, tilted his head, moved the robot back, and finally, quick as a sparrow, snatched the warmer and tucked it under his fingers. He held it to the robot first, then to his own palms. Maya smiled once, small and contained. Relief pressed behind her ribs. Good choice. A jogger slowed on the path, eyes curious. Maya gave a calm nod, and the jogger moved on. She kept her body angled away, hands visible, the space theirs to decide. She had learned, from years of helping in after-school programs and from caring for her own mother on fragile days, that trust is not a door you kick open. It is a hinge you oil, breath by careful breath. The boy's tremble softened. He sniffed. The robot rested in his lap, its single-dented eye catching a shard of light. He set the warmer between them and used one finger to trace. Not letters. Not at first. A line. Another line crossing it at an angle. Then a long arrow across the sand pointing away from the playground. At the tip, he drew a little square with a door. "Home," Maya said gently. He looked up, barely. A yes without sound. "I can walk with you," she said. "No hurry. We can stop if it feels too big." He hesitated, then slid the robot under his arm. He stood, slow and stiff, like a foal on new legs. Maya rose with him and kept her distance, matching the pace of his breath. 1, 2, 3. They stepped onto the path that followed his arrow. "Okay," she murmured. "We'll let Bolt lead." They reached the park gate. The city's late light fell in thin gold strips across the sidewalk. Somewhere behind them, a siren wailed and faded. The boy flinched, but didn't stop. He edged closer to her side, not touching, just near enough to borrow steadiness. "Almost there," Maya said, a promise more than a fact. He glanced at her cardigan. For a second, his shoulder dipped toward her, then straightened. He lifted the robot, set its little metal feet on the path as if Bolt could walk, and pointed again. The arrow in the sand was behind them now, but the direction had settled inside him. His breath stayed level. His hands shook less. They moved, step for small step, toward the place his arrow was trying to remember. Frantic footsteps shattered the fragile rhythm of the night. Maya turned just as a tall man in a navy suit came barreling down the sidewalk, tie skewed from running, breath cutting sharp in the cold. His eyes, piercing blue, wide with panic, locked on the boy clinging to the tin robot. "Evan!" His voice cracked, heavy with fear and relief all at once. The boy jolted, robot pressed tighter to his chest. Instead of running toward the man, he shuffled back until his shoulders brushed Maya's cardigan. His small frame trembled, and he hid his face against the wool as if it were a shield. Maya kept her voice steady, almost a whisper. "He's safe. Just give him a little space." The man stopped short, chest heaving. For a moment, the immaculate suit, the polished shoes, the red tie, all the markers of control, meant nothing. He was just a father, frantic and afraid. "Evan," he said again, softer now, almost pleading. His hands opened, empty, no longer reaching but waiting. "Buddy, I'm here." The boy peeked out, eyes darting. He pressed closer to Maya as though weighing which world felt safer. Maya could feel his small breaths quicken against her sleeve. She crouched a little, keeping herself level with him. "Maybe," she suggested quietly, her words aimed at both of them, "we try walking together. Slow. No rush." The father blinked at her, caught between gratitude and desperation. His jaw flexed. Then he nodded. He stepped back a pace, letting space breathe again. Maya tilted her head toward the sidewalk. "Come on, Evan. We'll all walk. You set the speed." The boy hesitated, then inched forward, robot gripped under his arm. Maya moved with him, calm and unhurried. The father matched their rhythm, every movement measured. His eyes never left his son, but he didn't push closer. The city was hushed around them, storefront lights dim, traffic thinned. Each step was its own fragile truce. Evan's breaths rasped, but steadied. The rhythm slow enough that his feet kept moving. After a block, the boy's hand brushed Maya's coat hem by accident. He froze, wide-eyed. She didn't move, didn't comment, only adjusted her stride to his. He took a breath, then another. The man's voice broke the silence. "Thank you," he said, raw and low, "for staying with him." Maya glanced at him. His face, though carved in sharp lines of power, carried exhaustion in every crease. "He found me," she answered simply. "I only stayed long enough for him to calm." The man nodded once, but his throat worked like he was swallowing words too heavy to say. They reached a corner where the streetlight spilled a pale circle. Evan paused, setting the robot's feet against the ground like it was walking too. He stared at the glow, then tugged Maya's sleeve lightly. His gesture was small but deliberate, his way of saying, "Keep going." Step by slow step, they crossed together, three figures bound not by words but by the fragile measure of breathing. And, though he never said it aloud, the father's eyes softened at the sight of his boy taking even these hesitant steps toward him. For the first time in months, Hope threaded through the panic. The cafe windows glowed warm against the chill night, condensation fogging the glass. Maya guided Evan through the door, holding it wide so he wouldn't feel rushed. Inside, the air smelled of cocoa and fresh bread. The boy hugged his robot tight, shoulders hunched as though bracing for a storm that wasn't there. "Table in the corner?" Maya asked gently. She didn't expect an answer, only gestured. Evan slid into the booth, pressing close to the wall. The man, Alexander, she gathered from the barista's surprised greeting, removed his coat, revealing the sharp cut of his navy suit, though his tie was still askew from running. He sat opposite, eyes never leaving his son. Maya ordered cocoa and grilled cheese, sliding the menu aside without fuss. When the cocoa arrived, she pushed the mug toward Evan. "It's hot. Stir slow." The boy gripped the spoon and swirled, watching the swirl of chocolate and steam. He didn't drink, but he didn't turn away either. Progress, Maya thought. Silence hung until Alexander finally spoke, his voice low and unpolished. "My wife died 18 months ago." He stared at the table, fingers tightening on his coffee cup. "Since then, Evan, he shuts down whenever it's too much. No one's been able to reach him. Not teachers, not therapists, not me." Maya studied the boy's small hands turning the spoon. His silence was not absence, she realized. It was survival. "He reached me tonight," she said softly. "He just needed someone to wait without asking too much." Alexander's gaze lifted, something raw flickering behind his polished mask. "I don't know how to do that. I run a company, thousands of employees. I can fix contracts, I can fix mergers, but I can't fix—" He broke off, eyes landing on his son. Maya pulled a napkin from the holder, clicked a pen from her bag, and began to draw. "What if we start small?" She sketched a path, little boxes with stars above them. "We call this a bravery map. Tonight's missions: eat, wash, read one page. Each one gets a star. No pressure, just choices." Evan's eyes tracked the pen. His lips parted as though he might speak, then pressed shut again. Still, his attention stayed. He touched the paper once, lightly, like testing if it was safe. Maya smiled, folding the napkin toward him. "This one's yours. You decide if the stars get earned." Alexander leaned back, rubbing his jaw. "You make it sound simple." "It isn't," Maya said, "but it can be gentle." The boy lifted the cocoa, sipping finally. His throat moved with the swallow, and a trace of chocolate stayed on his upper lip. Alexander exhaled, a sound halfway between relief and grief. "Thank you," he whispered, almost to himself. Maya caught the sound but let it rest. She knew too much weight on the moment would crush it. Instead, she looked at Evan. "One mission complete. That's one star." For the first time, the boy didn't look away. His eyes, deep brown and cautious, held hers for 3 whole breaths. Then he lowered his gaze, but not in retreat. Alexander reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and pressed a photo flat on the table, his late wife smiling, arms wrapped around a younger Evan with brighter eyes. He slid it toward Maya, voice breaking. "He used to talk all the time." Maya touched the edge of the photo, respectful but steady. "Then the words are still there. We'll find them again." Evan leaned against the booth wall, eyelids drooping, cocoa half gone. The robot rested on his lap. For a moment, Alexander's hand twitched as if to reach across. He didn't. Instead, he glanced at Maya, silently asking how. She nodded once. Slowly, always slowly. The boy breathed steady, his hand brushing the napkin map. Small, fragile steps, but steps nonetheless. The phone rang early the next morning, crisp against the quiet of Maya's apartment. She balanced a tray with tea for her mother, who sat in a worn armchair by the window, knitting slowly despite the stiffness in her hands. Maya set the tray down and answered. "Ms. Torres?" A polished voice carried through. "This is Julia, Mr. Alexander Harrington's assistant. He asked me to reach out regarding..." Evan. Maya's stomach tightened. Is he all right? He's fine, Julia assured quickly. Mr. Harrington was deeply struck by how calm his son was with you last night. He would like to invite you to join as Evan's transition caregiver. Flexible hours, compensation more than fair. Arrangements will be made so you can continue caring for your mother as well. Maya's hand gripped the phone harder. She glanced at her mother, who was humming faintly, unaware of the storm now rushing through her daughter's mind. I don't belong in his world, Maya said quietly. I'm not a specialist. I'm just me. Sometimes, Julia replied. That's exactly what a child needs. The line clicked off, leaving Maya with the weight of choice. She carried the news to her mother, who looked up with soft eyes. You've always had a way with children, Mija. Maybe this is where you're meant to stand. But his world? Maya started, pacing. Mansions, investors, headlines. I don't want Evan to be another project, another photo op, and I can't fail him. Not after last night. Her mother reached for her hand, fingers cool but firm. You didn't fail him. You sat, you breathed, you waited. That's more than most would do. Later that day, Maya met Alexander at a cafe near the waterfront. He arrived precisely on time, suit immaculate, but his eyes carried the fatigue of sleepless nights. He gestured toward the table. I owe you more than I can say, he began, voice even but strained. Last night, I saw something I haven't seen in a long time. Evan leaning toward someone, trusting. It was like watching the sun fight through storm clouds. Maya folded her hands. He doesn't need someone who'll push. He needs space, safety. If I step into this, it has to be on those terms. Alexander nodded, leaning forward. Name them. First, she said firmly, I decide the pace of connection. No rushed therapy, no cameras, no pressure to perform. Second, my hours must allow me to care for my mother. If that isn't possible, I walk away. For a moment, she thought he might bristle. CEOs weren't used to conditions, but instead, his expression softened. Done, he said. Both conditions. Done. Silence stretched, broken only by gulls outside and the clink of a silverware. Alexander exhaled slowly. You may not see yourself as an expert, but last night you were the only one who reached him. That matters more than degrees or titles. Maya studied him, the cut of control in his posture, the desperation that slipped through when he spoke of his son. She thought of Evan's small arrow drawn in the dirt, pointing home. Maybe she was meant to follow it too. All right, she said finally. I'll try. For Evan. A flicker of relief lit his face, fleeting but real. Thank you, he whispered. That evening, Maya stood in her small kitchen, helping her mother sip tea. She explained her decision. Her mother smiled faintly. Every home has its storms, Maya. Maybe you're being asked to be the quiet in theirs. Maya lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. She knew nothing about mansions or boardrooms, but she knew about silence, about fear, about how fragile trust could be. If she could protect even a sliver of that for Evan, it would be worth stepping into a world that felt impossibly far from her own. The estate rose like a fortress of glass and stone above the bay, its sharp lines reflecting the restless tide below. Maya gripped the strap of her bag tighter as the iron gates swung open. She felt small walking up the long drive, her shoes crunching on gravel finer than sugar. Inside, the house echoed. Marble floors, high ceilings, staircases that curved like ribbons. Yet it felt hollow, too perfect, as if someone had built a palace and forgotten to fill it with life. Evan padded across the polished floor in socks, his robot tucked under his arm. His steps were quiet, his eyes scanning corners as though searching for a safe place that didn't exist. Hey, Maya said softly. She crouched, opening her bag. From it, she pulled a folded rug, a small lamp with a warm bulb, and a shoebox filled with handmade emotion cards, faces drawn with simple lines. Happy, scared, anxious, calm. This is the quiet corner. No one has to come here but you. No one takes it away. It's yours." Evan watched, hesitant, then lowered the robot onto the rug. He tapped one card, curious, with the robot's dented foot. Maya smiled. "That's a good start." Alexander appeared in the doorway, his suit jacket off, sleeves rolled up. He studied the little corner, a crease of doubt between his brows. "Will this help?" "It isn't about fixing," Maya answered. "It's about giving him a place that feels steady. Kids need something that's theirs when the world feels too big." Alexander's gaze shifted to his son. "And what about me? I don't even know how to be steady anymore." Maya took a breath. "Then start with presence, not fixing, not teaching, just being there." That night, after dinner mostly pushed around plates, she proposed a ritual. 2 minutes, she said, holding up her phone timer. "Every night. You both sit together. No rules. No talking if you don't want. Just presence." Alexander hesitated, but nodded. 2 minutes. I can do that." Evan sat cross-legged on the rug, robot in lap. Alexander lowered himself slowly beside him, his large frame stiff in contrast to his son's small shoulders. For a long while, there was nothing but silence. Then the robot's head tilted in Evan's hands. The boy traced a line along its dent, as if mapping an old scar. His breathing steadied. His eyes flicked toward his father, not quite meeting his gaze but not looking away either. The timer chimed. 2 minutes finished. Evan placed the robot gently on the rug. Alexander's hand twitched, almost reaching out but stopped short. Maya whispered from the doorway, "That's enough for tonight. Tomorrow we'll grow from here." Later, Alexander walked her to the door. The house around them glimmered with wealth, but his voice was stripped bare. "I've built everything a man could build, but inside these walls, it feels empty." Maya met his eyes, steady. "Then let's start filling it with moments, not marble." Behind them, the lamp in the quiet corner glowed softly. Evan had curled onto the rug, robot tucked beneath his chin, finally asleep without fear. For the first time, the house didn't feel so hollow. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the wide bay windows, but the mansion still felt hushed. Evan sat cross-legged on the rug in his quiet corner, his robot balanced on his knees. He thumbed through the box of emotion cards until he found one. Anxious. He held it up, his small hand trembling. Maya knelt beside him. "Anxious," she repeated softly, giving the word weight. "That's brave, to show it." She drew a circle on the rug with her finger. "This is Bolt's safety circle. Only people you invite may enter. You're the guard." Evan set the robot inside and sat back, chin lifted just slightly. His eyes flicked toward the doorway where Alexander lingered, uncertain. Maya gestured. "Ask him. You're in charge." Evan swallowed, then tapped the robot's head once and looked at his father. It was the smallest invitation, but unmistakable. Alexander crouched at the edge of the circle, his hands resting on his knees. "May I come in?" His voice was careful, stripped of authority. The boy hesitated, then gave one tight nod. Alexander exhaled as though he'd been holding his breath for months. He stepped inside the invisible circle and lowered himself slowly, leaving space. Evan didn't run. He didn't hide. He simply placed the anxious card on the rug between them. Progress. Fragile, but real. That night, they tried the ritual again. 2 minutes. Father and son side by side in silence. At first, Alexander fidgeted, fingers twitching with the urge to say something. Maya shook her head from the doorway. Just be. This time, Evan reached for a book. A robot story, edges worn. He held it out, not directly, but enough that his father could see. Alexander picked it up with reverence, as though the paper were sacred. "Page 1, he said quietly, opening the cover. His deep voice filled the quiet, steady and calm. He read of robots who learned courage one bolt at a time. Evan didn't look at him, but he didn't look away either. His eyes stayed fixed on the page, shoulders softening with each line. When the timer chimed, Evan touched the robot's dented head and whispered something too soft to catch. His lips moved, breath stirring the air. Alexander froze, straining, but the moment passed before he could decipher it. Still, tears pricked his eyes. After Evan settled into bed, clutching Bolt, Alexander joined Maya in the hall. His voice was rough, almost hoarse. "Did you see that? He let me in. Just a little, but it was real." Maya smiled, tired but hopeful. "These are victories, Mr. Harrington. Small victories. They build the bridge." He shook his head. "Call me Alexander. After what you've given us tonight, you've earned that much." Maya nodded once, meeting his gaze. Then Alexander. "Keep walking the bridge, even when it feels slow." He pressed a hand against the wall, steadying himself. "Slow," he echoed. "I can do slow." Inside the bedroom, the boy slept soundly, robot tucked under his chin. For the first time in many nights, his dreams seemed lighter. The flash came first, a burst of white that startled Maya as she carried Evan out of the park 2 days later. He had spiraled into panic after a balloon popped during a picnic, his breathing shallow and wild. She had lifted him instinctively, shielding his small body against hers. But in the bushes, a camera clicked. By morning, the photo was everywhere. Headlines screamed across news sites and social feeds. CEO's mysterious nanny, or abductor. The image showed Maya clutching Evan, his face buried in her shoulder, his tin robot clutched between them. To strangers, it looked suspicious, even dangerous. Inside the mansion, Alexander slammed the paper down on the kitchen island. His jaw was rigid, eyes storming. "They're calling you a kidnapper." Maya stood across from him, arms folded tight. "I was calming him, that's all. But I knew this would happen. Your world is always watching, always twisting." Evan sat at the table, untouched toast in front of him. He traced circles on the crust with Bolt's metal hand, pretending not to hear. Alexander's phone buzzed again and again. He glanced, cursed under his breath. "The board is panicking. Investors want me to cut ties immediately." Maya's voice was steady but low. "If you do, what will that teach him? That when he lets someone in, they disappear the moment it costs you?" Alexander flinched, the truth striking sharper than the headlines. That afternoon, Maya noticed staff whispering as she walked through the hall. Evan clung closer than usual, his small hand gripping her cardigan. She whispered, "It's all right. I'm not going anywhere without telling you." His grip softened, but he didn't let go. By evening, the storm had only grown. News vans lined the street outside the gates. Commentators dissected her background, questioning her motives. Investors called for stability. "Distance yourself," one message demanded. "Show decisive leadership." In the quiet corner, Evan sat rigid, staring at the anxious card. Bolt lay across his knees. Maya lowered herself to the rug, holding her own breath steady. "Sometimes," she said softly, "people outside don't understand. They see a picture, not the truth, but we know what happened. And the truth doesn't change just because others can't see it." Evan looked up, eyes wide as if begging her not to leave. Alexander stepped into the doorway, tie loosened, lines etched deep into his face. He watched his son's fear, Maya's calm. His chest rose, fell, but he said nothing. That silence stretched through the night, heavy as stone. Maya tucked Evan in later, robot under his arm. She smoothed his hair and whispered, "You're safe. You're loved, even when the world is loud." In the hall, Alexander leaned against the wall, eyes shadowed. "If I keep you here, I risk everything I've built. But if I let you go—" He swallowed, his voice breaking. "I risk losing him for good." Maya met his gaze, firm but sad. "Sometimes you can't serve both masters. You'll have to choose." Down the hall, Evan's small breathing steadied into sleep, unaware that the choice hanging in the air could reshape all their lives. Maya folded her resignation letter 3 times before slipping it into her bag. Her chest felt heavy as stone. She had promised herself she wouldn't let the noise of cameras and headlines harm Evan. And yet, here she was, about to walk away. She found Alexander in his study, papers scattered across the desk. His suit jacket was off, sleeves rolled, tie hanging loose. He looked up, eyes rimmed with fatigue. "I can't stay," Maya said quietly, pulling the letter free. "I won't be the reason he fears again." Alexander's jaw clenched. "You think leaving will help him? You're the only one he trusts." "Maybe, but if staying means he watches me torn apart on screens, if he learns that trust only brings pain, then I've already failed him." Her voice cracked on the last word. Unseen in the doorway, Evan lingered. Bolt pressed to his chest, he caught the words. His breath quickened, chest rising and falling too fast. He ducked back into the hall, retreating to his room, silent but breaking. Alexander closed his eyes, hand pressed hard against his forehead. "Maya, don't," but she slid the envelope across the desk. "You don't have to say it. I know what your board wants. I know what the papers scream. You can't fight everyone." He stared at the letter, but his hand wouldn't touch it. His silence stretched, an agony of indecision. And silence, Maya thought bitterly, was betrayal in its own way. That night, before leaving, she crept quietly to Evan's room. The boy was curled on his rug, not his bed. Bolt clutched beneath his chin. His eyes glistened but refused to spill. Maya knelt, laying something beside him, a new napkin bravery map. This one wasn't for her and Evan. It was for father and son. Tiny boxes labeled with stars. Eat together. Sit together. Breathe together. She brushed Evan's hair once. Gentle. "You're braver than you know," she whispered. "Keep building the map." The boy blinked, clutching Bolt tighter. His lips parted as though he wanted to plead, but no words came. His silence cut deeper than any cry. Maya forced herself to stand. She walked the long hall, suitcase in hand. At the front door, Alexander appeared, shadows under his eyes. "You could fight for him," Maya whispered, "but you have to fight for him out loud." He reached for words, but none came. And so she left, the door closing softly behind her. Upstairs, Evan lay awake long into the night. Bolt pressed so tight the dented edge dug into his skin. He traced the bravery map with his finger, over and over, desperate not to let the stars fade. The smoke rolled in thick and acrid, seeping through the mansion's vents just after midnight. Wildfires had been burning miles away, but the wind shifted suddenly, funneling the haze toward the bay. The air grew heavy, biting at the lungs. Evan stirred first, coughing hard in his sleep. He bolted upright on the rug where he'd fallen asleep beside Bolt, gasping for breath, small chest hitching. Panic widened his eyes. His inhaler was empty, long forgotten at school. Alexander rushed in, heart pounding. "Evan! Evan!" He knelt, helpless as his son wheezed. The boy clawed at the air, robot slipping from his grasp. "Please, God." Alexander's voice cracked, raw fear strangling him. He grabbed his phone, but his shaking hands froze. Who would know what to do? Then, headlights pierced the smoky night outside. Tires screeched in the drive. The door burst open. Maya, hair unbound, clutching a spacer inhaler and medical kit. She dropped to her knees beside them. "Listen to me," she said firmly, voice cutting through the panic. "Alexander, hold him steady. Evan, eyes on me. Balloon breaths, remember." She demonstrated, deep inhale, slow exhale, then fitted the inhaler into the spacer and pressed it to Evan's mouth. "Breathe in. Hold. Out," she coached. "Good. Again. You're safe. Dad's here. I'm here." Alexander's hands trembled as he steadied his son. He whispered, almost praying, "Come on, buddy. Stay with me." Evan's chest rose raggedly, then steadied with each coached breath. Slowly, color crept back into his cheeks. His trembling hand brushed against Alexander's red tie, gripping it as if anchoring himself. Tears blurred Alexander's vision. "That's it, son. That's it." Maya counted out the breaths, firm and calm until the boy's wheezing softened into a tired rhythm. Evan sagged forward at last, head resting against his father's chest. Bolt clutched loosely in one hand. Alexander cradled him tight, his voice breaking. "You saved him," he whispered, looking at Maya with raw gratitude. "No," she corrected gently, brushing soot from Evan's hair. "You did. He let you in tonight." The mansion felt smaller, filled not with emptiness but with the pounding of 3 hearts, steadying together. For the first time, Evan's fragile trust had taken root, his tiny hand wrapped in his father's tie, refusing to let go. Morning light pushed through smoke-streaked clouds, casting the mansion in a pale gray. Alexander stood before the camera in his study, tie straightened, jaw set. A live stream light blinked red. Thousands of eyes, investors, employees, strangers, watched. "My name is Alexander Harrington," he began, voice low but steady. "And I need to tell you the truth." He glanced at the doorway where Maya stood with Evan, Bolt tucked under the boy's arm. The memory of last night, Evan gasping, Maya rushing in, still burned in his chest. He faced the camera again. "The woman in those photographs," he said, "didn't kidnap my son. She saved him. She is the only person he trusts enough to breathe beside. And I will not allow her name to be dragged through mud for doing what none of us could, reaching my boy." His voice grew stronger, conviction replacing fear. "We talk about profits, growth, innovation. But what good is any of it if we fail the children who need us most? Today, I'm announcing the Care in Place Fund. We will train trauma-informed caregivers in schools, parks, and neighborhoods. No parent should feel helpless. No child should feel invisible." Comments flooded the screen. Some skeptical, most stunned, many supportive. Behind him, Evan stirred, eyes wide. He pressed closer to Maya, but for the first time, his gaze didn't avoid his father. He seemed to be listening. Alexander's voice softened. "This is not just business. It's personal. I have failed my son too many times by staying silent. No more." He leaned forward. "If the board wants to remove me for standing by him, so be it. But I will not abandon the only person who still looks at me with hope." He ended the stream with a click, exhaling hard. Silence filled the room. Maya stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "That was brave," she said finally. Alexander turned to her, shoulders heavy but eyes clear. "Wasn't brave. It was overdue." On the rug, Evan traced circles on Bolt's dented head, then looked up at his father. Slowly, carefully, he tapped the robot's foot twice against the floor, the same way he had once invited Maya into his circle. Alexander's breath caught. He knelt beside his son, not reaching, just waiting. "May I come in?" he asked softly. Evan hesitated, then gave a single, quiet nod. And, for the first time, Alexander didn't feel like a CEO holding the weight of the world. He felt like a father, finally invited inside. That night, the house was quiet except for the soft hum of the bay wind against the glass walls. Maya returned, not as an outsider or employee, but as someone Alexander openly welcomed into Evan's fragile circle. She carried a new idea, one simple, gentle ritual that might root their progress deeper. She spread her hand wide, palm open. "This is called the 5-finger connection," she explained, kneeling on the rug. "Each night, you and your dad touch hands. For every finger, you share one word, any word. Then you breathe together." Evan studied her hand, then peeked at his father. Alexander mirrored the gesture, his large hand trembling slightly. "One word," he said softly. I can do that." The boy hesitated, clutching Bolt with his other arm. Slowly, almost shyly, he pressed his small palm against his father's. Alexander swallowed. "Strong," he offered, thumb to thumb. Maya nodded. "That's one. Evan, your turn." Evan's lips moved, but no sound came, his brows furrowed, eyes flicking down. He looked ready to pull back. Alexander shook his head quickly, voice gentle. "It's okay. You don't have to." But Evan didn't pull away. His chest rose, shaky but steadying. He whispered, barely audible, "Dad." The word hung in the air like a bell. Alexander froze, eyes flooding. He hadn't heard that word in almost 2 years. His throat closed, his breath hitched. "Say it again," he begged, tears spilling down his face. "Please." Evan whispered once more, firmer this time. "Dad." Alexander crumpled forward, wrapping his arms around his son, but careful not to crush him. "I'm here. I'll always be here." His voice broke against Evan's hair. "I'm so sorry it took me this long." Maya pressed a hand to her own mouth, blinking back tears. She'd known they were close, but this was the breakthrough. Evan leaned into his father's chest, eyes closing, Bolt nestled between them. His breathing was calm, no longer shallow with fear. His hand stayed pressed against Alexander's, fingers laced. No hesitation. In that moment, titles and headlines meant nothing. The boy had spoken one word, and it had rebuilt an entire world. The next evening, rain streaked against the tall windows, soft drumming filling the silence. Evan was asleep upstairs, Bolt clutched in his arms. Maya sat in the library, sorting through emotion cards, when Alexander entered quietly. He carried something in his hand, not glittering, not grand, just a folded piece of paper, worn from handling. He paused by her chair. "I didn't know how to do this," he said. His voice was unsteady, stripped of boardroom polish. "Diamonds, contracts, big gestures, that's what people expect from me. But you've shown me that what matters here," he held out the paper, "is different." Maya unfolded it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note, ink pressed heavy into the fibers. "You've held both our hearts without dropping either. I can't promise perfection, only that I'll build a family plan, step by step, therapy for Evan, support for your mother, space for you to breathe, and when the time is right, a vow, not of wealth, but of presence." Her chest tightened. She read the lines twice, then looked up. His blue eyes were uncertain, vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. "This isn't a ring," Alexander said. "Not yet. Maybe someday. But tonight, it's a promise that I won't run when it gets hard." Maya folded the paper gently, pressing it to her chest. Her eyes shimmered, but her smile was soft. "Slow steps," she whispered, "so they last." The storm outside rattled the windows, but inside the air felt steady. Alexander sank into the chair across from her, elbows on his knees. For the first time, silence between them wasn't heavy. It was warm, a quiet acknowledgement of something beginning. Upstairs, Evan stirred, murmuring in his sleep. Alexander started to rise, but Maya touched his wrist. "Let him rest. He knows you're here." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the walls of the glass and stone mansion seemed less hollow. A family plan had begun, not with wealth or spectacle, but with ink on paper, slow steps, and the fragile word of a child learning to trust again. The Museum of Flight buzzed with families and school groups, voices echoing under the steel ribs of old aircraft. Alexander walked between the displays, his suit jacket traded for a simple sweater, his pace unhurried. Beside him, Maya kept close, scanning the high wings and polished fuselages with quiet wonder. Evan trailed ahead, Bolt tucked under his arm. He stopped beneath the broad wings of a silver DC-3, its belly gleaming under spotlights. Slowly, He set the robot on the floor and knelt. "Bolt doesn't like flying alone," Maya said gently, crouching beside him. Evan looked up, then pressed the robot into her hands. His eyes brimmed with something unsaid. With a trembling motion, he twisted open a small compartment hidden in the robot's chest. Inside, nestled against the metal, was a tiny band etched with 4 words: "One family, one breath." Maya's throat tightened. She cupped the band as though it were made of glass. "Evan." The boy's lips moved. He whispered, so faintly it almost vanished, "Mom?" Tears slipped down Maya's cheeks before she could stop them. She pulled him close, wrapping her arms around his small frame. "I'm not her, sweetheart, but I'm here, and I love you." Alexander stepped forward, kneeling on the other side. His hand covered both of theirs, steady and sure. His voice was firm, resonant under the wings of history. "Our family starts here. No looking back." Evan pressed his forehead to Maya's chest, clutching her sweater. Alexander slipped the band onto his own finger, not as a ring of romance, but as a vow of belonging. Under the vast wings of the DC-3, with engines that once carried passengers across oceans, 3 people formed a promise. Not perfect, not finished, but real. And for the first time in years, Evan smiled without hesitation, the dented robot resting in safe hands. 1 year later, the city park no longer felt lonely or hollow. Children laughed on the swings, and along the benches sat new boxes marked with a simple emblem: a small robot and an open hand. Inside each kit were emotion cards, breathing tools, even toy robots like Bolt. The Quiet Corners initiative had spread across the city, born from a single boy's fragile trust. On their favorite bench, Alexander sat in a navy sweater, his arm resting on the back as he watched Evan race through the grass. The boy's laughter rang clear, no longer edged with fear. He called out, "Dad, watch this!" and leapt from a climbing bar, landing with a grin. The word "Dad" still hit Alexander like sunlight breaking cloud. He blinked fast, smiling wide. "I see you, champ." Maya sat beside him, her hand resting over his. She looked at the park, families gathering around the new Quiet Corner kits, parents kneeling to breathe slowly with their children, and whispered, "It started here, with one night, one arrow in the dirt." Alexander nodded, voice low. "It began when you sat down at just the right distance, and I stayed long enough for my son to step in." Evan bounded back, Bolt tucked under his arm. He squeezed between them on the bench, pressing close. "5-finger connection?" he asked, holding out his hand. Father, son, and Maya touched palms. One word each, whispered into the evening breeze: strong, safe, home. And as the park lights blinked on, the family breathed together. One rhythm, one promise. Quiet Corners no longer empty, but alive with hope.